we struggled with infertility. I've only ever gotten pregnant via IVF. And, we lost our first pregnancy. And then with our second, our daughter Colette, made it past the scary first trimester. And when I was 21 weeks pregnant, I was hospitalized with severe preeclampsia and told, you'll be here until you deliver. And so, just, talk about the world sort of just, coming to a pause and thinking, what is it? What are we going to do? And once I was hospitalized, I was in the hospital about a day or two, it occurred to me how blessed and how lucky I was that we could actually afford to handle this hospitalization and what was likely going to be a NICU stay. And I also realized in that same vein is that I knew I was definitely the minority that could do that. And so I remember turning to my husband and saying, we need to do something about this. All of that. And, he turned to me and he said, please, for the love of God, could you please just worry about yourself once? And I said, well, that's not really what I do. You know who you married. What are you talking about? But really, it just sort of stayed with me. And, throughout the whole process, it kept coming back to me in my head. Ultimately, I was in the hospital just over 3 weeks, and then the doctors recommended delivery. So Colette was born at 24 weeks and 5 days, and went straight to the NICU. And we spent 9 days in the NICU before she died. And I always call it, she gained her angel wings. But, in that whole process, going through NICU and seeing the whole, the toll it takes on parents, right? And I was being told by doctors and nurses, and I was hearing doctors and nurses tell, other parents, you might want to save your leave time, go back to work now and save your leave time for when baby comes home. And, I had a very difficult postpartum recovery, and I couldn't imagine. I was in no shape to go back to work. There was absolutely no way that I could have gone back to work. And just thinking about that and thinking how much time they were losing with their kids and, not being participating. And so all of those kinds of things, just kept sort of making this idea and this thought process. There are things we've never covered that, will come up. So for example, I'm thinking of, we had a girl who was 16, had a baby in the NICU. And what she had told her social worker, her biggest fear was that she was sort of stuck in this cycle. Her mom had gotten pregnant very young with her. Her grandmother had gotten very pregnant with her mother, and neither of them had finished high school. And so for her, she was like, I want to do better for my child. And so she said, I would like to finish my high school degree. And so they worked with us, and the hospital was able to find a laptop that she could use to do online school while she was at the NICU. So with her baby, being able to do that. And we helped with her tuition to finish that degree. And so it's not, in the grand scheme of things, like it's not necessarily that her being able to do this meant her baby did better, but it also meant she was starting something and doing something and breaking a cycle, which I think is, a huge issue. And so those are the things that we want to hear about too. All of those like unique one-off, situations that may only happen to one family ever. And really taking the time to look at those.
So I will say that, so Elizabeth Carr, who is the first IVF baby born in the US, I have followed her on LinkedIn, and she's very much an advocate for reproductive rights. And we started an IVF line after the decision in Alabama and all of that. We really wanted, I think one of the ways that we're going to combat this is for all of us to start telling our stories and how IVF has helped us grow our families. I think that that's huge, and that's one of the first things that we can really do. And so it just so happened that during Infertility Awareness Week, which was about a month ago, she posted something, and orange is the color for infertility awareness. And she said, every year I remind myself that I don't have a lot of orange, and I always mean to buy orange and I don't. And I just commented and said, I would love to send you a t-shirt that says IVF baby in adult sizes, and we have them in orange. And so she said, yes, I would love to wear one. And so we sent her a shirt, and she, has agreed that once she gets the shirt, she will wear it and post on social media. And I think, it was just one of those things, right? It kind of like came to me and I was like, you know what? The worst case is she can ignore it and it's not going to change anything of like what I'm doing, right? And the best thing is she can do what ended up happening, which was like, yes, I'll do it. And, here's my address. And how do we do that? And so I think that was probably one of the boldest things I've done. And then I think really just putting myself out there, saying it, my goal is 50,000 by the end of the year, saying that to people, and explaining why that was the case and what that was coming from. There wasn't an arbitrary number, it was a very well thought out plan and, in terms of the numbers, and then this is what I want to do. And so how do I do that?
Welcome to Unimaginable Wellness, the podcast for founders, entrepreneurs, and creators who are now moms. You are running on all cylinders and you don't want to slow down. You also simply can't afford to stay knocked down by anxiety, overwhelm, depression, exhaustion, burnout, or diaper blowouts. So here's the good news. Motherhood came bearing gifts. You now have access to the explosive superpower of your imagination. It can help you avoid, navigate, and get through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, motherhood, and life. I'm your host, Melissa Lorena, a mom to 3 high-energy boys and entrepreneur since 2011. Today, you're going to learn how to use and stretch your imagination and some other new mom capabilities you've earned. So get ready to pick up practical tools and lessons you can tailor to your life from the most dynamic humans in the world operating at the fringes of their imagination. Sounds good? Then keep listening. So Michelle, share with the listeners who you are and a bit about your organization, and really let us know like what makes your organization distinguishable versus other organizations in this space.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So I'm Michelle. I'm a mom of 3. I have 2 angel babies, Sweet Pea and Colette, and an almost 4-year-old who I think has the energy of all 3 of them. And our road to parenthood was tough. We struggled with infertility. I've only ever gotten pregnant via IVF. And we lost our first pregnancy. And then with our second, our daughter Colette, made it past the scary first trimester. And when I was 21 weeks pregnant, I was hospitalized with severe preeclampsia and told, you'll be here until you deliver. And so, talk about the world sort of just, coming to a pause and thinking, what is it? What are we going to do? And once I was hospitalized, I was in the hospital about a day or 2, it occurred to me how blessed and how lucky I was that we could actually afford to handle this hospitalization and what was likely going to be a NICU stay. And I also realized in that same vein is that I knew I was definitely the minority that could do that. And so I remember turning to my husband and saying, we need to do something about this. All of that. And, he turned to me and he said, please, for the love of God, could you please just worry about yourself once? And I said, well, that's not really what I do. You know who you married. What are you talking about? But really, it just sort of stayed with me. And, throughout the whole process, it kept coming back to me in my head. Ultimately, I was in the hospital just over 3 weeks, and then the doctors recommended delivery. So Colette was born at 24 weeks and 5 days, and went straight to the NICU. And we spent 9 days in the NICU before she died. And I always call it, she gained her angel wings. But in that whole process, going through NICU and seeing the whole, the toll it takes on parents, right? And I was being told by doctors and nurses, and I was hearing doctors and nurses tell, other parents, you might want to save your leave time, go back to work now and save your leave time for when baby comes home. And I had a very difficult postpartum recovery, and I couldn't imagine. I was in no shape to go back to work. There was absolutely no way that I could have gone back to work. And just thinking about that and thinking how much time they were losing with their kids and, not being participating. And so all of those kinds of things, just kept sort of making this idea and this thought process to provide financial assistance for families. And when I got out, so I had worked in nonprofits my whole life. And when I got out, I had always sworn I would never, ever, 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 ever start my own nonprofit. And so, funny things, never say never. And so I thought somebody else is doing this. And what I found was, and still to this date, I don't see that anybody is touching the pregnancy part in terms of financial assistance. And that to me was very important. Um, so organizations were hitting NICU or loss. But nobody was helping pregnancy. There were very specific locations. So it might be a certain state, a certain county, a certain hospital. And there was very formulaic, this is what we provide, are these things. And so I was looking at it and I was thinking, first of all, on the location idea, I've always been a proponent of health equity and, fairness. And I thought, well, why should it mean that just because I deliver at a certain hospital, I can get financial assistance, but if I deliver at another hospital, I can't. And so that was very much a thought process. The fact that pregnancy wasn't included, and I felt like that was a big piece of not only our story, but of a lot of people's stories, right? And it just kind of makes sense. If you're helping in pregnancy, you have there's less chance of long NICU hospitalizations and less chance of loss. And so, doing that, and then I didn't want to be very formulaic. I wanted to know, for me, it's always like every family is different and has different needs. And so I really wanted something that would, allow us to look at each application, each family independently and adjust what we were doing based on their needs. And so we launched on Colette's due date, so September 7th of 2018. And, it's just been amazing to see the takeoff and the need that is happening. So right now, we have helped over 2,300 families. We've hit all 50 states, and we've given away a little over 1.5 million. And it's just been crazy. And we're not meeting the need. I mean, the need is so great. And so many people just really find themselves in these situations that become crises, and that there's no planning for a lot of these situations.
So I was curious, that thought, somebody else is doing this, somebody else must be paying attention to this cause. I think that's something that happens oftentimes when we feel like, okay, there's a little bit of media coverage, as they say, like maternity leave, paternity leave, like these topics are like spoken of, right? Like in media, social media, and all of that. And so, it's very easy for us to assume, well, someone else must be handling that. There must be someone who's the advocate of this, message and this cause. And so my question to you is the following. So in your world, right? Like where does the buck stop? So like certain organizations are handling what sort of expenses, and then where do you like close the gap or meet the need that is not being fulfilled by those entities or other entities?
Right. Great question. So I think one of the biggest things is that there's a cap on services. So there's organizations that, for example, will give to families that qualify under their guidelines, they will give $100 gift card, and that could be gas, that could be food, that kind of thing. And that's great. And we still, we have a lot of our families who have also requested that help, or receive that help, depending on how it is. And so, that's something, again, like the pregnancies piece is not being taken into account. Some organizations, they have X amount of dollars and they give them out, where we're very fiscally responsible about how we're giving them out throughout the year. But there are some organizations that, might get X amount of dollars. And then once that's up, they're done until the next budget cycle. And so, not loving that. We're not stuck to a certain dollar amount. We're not stuck to what people, might need. And we've been very adaptable to what our families need. We didn't think about, just because it wasn't something that really factored into our experience, but we didn't think about the cost of transportation. And that being a really big request. And that remains our number one, number two request. And it makes sense because we have found that our average family is traveling 62 miles one way to the NICU. And so that's a huge cost that adds up really, really quickly, right? And that's the average. I mean, we've had people who are driving 200, 300 miles to get to the NICU. And so I think we've been very much like, let's hear from families. Let's see what they need. We also spend a lot of time talking with social workers to say, what are the things coming up? But really it's trying to get a little bit of support so that, a family could do a pregnancy bed rest or limitations, that they can be seeing their babies as much as they can, that they can do the memorialization of their loss. And so, it's really been, we sit and we review every single application, and, really read it and really try to find where it is that we can help. And, what are the things that we can do that gets things accomplished. And, I think that that's really unique. We don't have formulaic anything. We look at it. There are things we've never covered that, will come up. So for example, I'm thinking of, we had a girl who was 16, had a baby in the NICU. And what she had told her social worker, her biggest fear was that she was sort of stuck in this cycle. Her mom had gotten pregnant very young with her. Her grandmother had gotten very pregnant with her mother, and neither of them had finished high school. And so for her, she was like, I want to do better for my child. And so she said, I would like to finish my high school degree. And so they worked with us, and the hospital was able to find a laptop that she could use to do online school while she was at the NICU. So with her baby, being able to do that. And we helped with her tuition to finish that degree. And so it's not, in the grand scheme of things, like it's not necessarily that her being able to do this meant her baby did better, but it also meant she was starting something and doing something and breaking a cycle, which I think is, a huge issue. And so those are the things that we want to hear about too. All of those like unique one-off situations that may only happen to one family ever, and really taking the time to look at those.
Okay, so again, on that thread, right? Somebody else is doing this because I think, like, let's say, like, watching TV and seeing, current events and seeing things on TV, and we're kind of like stuck in our own lives, right? We're like, okay, well, I have food, I have water, I have resources, as an example. And I imagine a lot of the listeners might feel really, really, you know, blessed and also just like not in the same state of needing donations, right, in order to get through a really rough and emotionally trying moment. So okay, along that thread of somebody else is doing this, it sounds to me, Michelle, that somebody else was not going to help that girl feel a sense of accomplishment and then carry that positive feeling and emotional state as she was with her NICU baby. Like, and
Right.
babies feel us, like they know,
Mhm.
right? Like they know if mommy is okay, like they can
Right.
tell. So,
Right.
okay, so somebody else was not doing that in terms of tuition for this one person. So, same idea. Why don't you share a couple of other instances that might not feel so obvious to someone that's never been in that situation, but would like to help you, especially, Mother's Day just passed. And obviously, we don't really need just one day to be
Right.
celebrated and respected. This should be like annual, all the time, forever. So,
Mhm.
okay, what's another thing that somebody else was not doing, but through the foundation, you guys were doing? And you guys are
Right.
a lean team. I just want to say that right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
when we're saying, when Michelle is saying like somebody else, is doing this, it's like legit, like a family in a house with a child with a bunch of energy and trying to do something that's so amazing, right? So go
Right.
ahead, give us another moment of
Yeah.
somebody else
I
wasn't doing
think,
it.
we've done things like a family who has lost a baby and maybe was able to come up with the money for a cremation, but might just have ashes in a box, and don't have them in a really pretty urn, right? And it's not that urns are super expensive, but if a family has been through a lot and may not be able to afford the $400, the $500 that an urn could be. So those are things. On the loss thing as well, sometimes we have families who, again, they've had something covered. It might be that their particular community has a program, has a plan. Sometimes funeral homes just, donate the whole thing and they like recoup the expenses. Um, things like that. But then they want memorial jewelry. They want something that they can hold onto their baby as they go forward. And especially in really early pregnancy losses, they don't get the funerals and the services and things like that. And so that might be the only way that they can really remember their baby and remember what that means. And so some people will sort of look at it and say, "Why are you covering jewelry?" And what we know is that that's not just a piece of jewelry, right? This is something that is really important and that reminds people. I mean, you talked about Mother's Day, and I think anybody who's ever lost from the earliest pregnancy all the way through, an infant death knows that, a lot of people, especially the earlier in the pregnancy that it is, don't really look at people like moms and dads. And so, that's something that I think is saying, even if the world doesn't see me, that I know and I'm recognizing my motherhood, my fatherhood. Um, and I think that's really important to do. On NICU, it's been, sometimes it's medical equipment that they're sent home with, that insurance doesn't cover. So it might be, the trying to think, it's like there's an oxygen concentrator that a lot of babies are sent home with, that they might, need, and it could be a couple $100 and insurance doesn't cover that or it's their deductible. And so, we're helping with those kinds of situations because we don't want kids going back to the NICU. We don't want parents, because they have no other option, skipping doctor recommended, steps and things like that because they can't have another option. Helping with, post NICU, right? So sometimes we have a family who has already been discharged. But, when I talked about the distance of a NICU, that also means that once they go home, they have a distance of doctor's appointments. And, they may have a lot, depending on, NICU babies can run the whole spectrum of things, right? And so if they have to see multiple doctors pretty regularly and they're doing that drive, we want to help with those situations. We want to help when they go, if they have to go back to the hospital, which is, always terrible, but, we will do that too. We've had families where baby is sent home, but then needs, a heart surgery or some sort of surgery, and they need to be older and weigh more and, be a little bit healthier. So they'll go home for 6 months and then, come back. And then the costs are the same, but they're not NICU. They're in a different situation. And for us, we use NICU, but very, very adapted, kind of things of what that really means. And, I think that that's really important. Anything in the pregnancy sphere, that can be childcare. If you think of a stay-at-home mom who hasn't really needed to use childcare and then is put on bed rest, any parent, anybody who's been around, toddlers and kids knows bed rest with children around, that's not happening, right? And, so is it childcare so that, the pregnant person can actually have some bed rest? Or in situations where they can't lift a lot, would that childcare help doing that? All of those kinds of things that just, I think, are so useful and so helpful. We had a story of a woman who, and luckily her doctor was really responsive. She was a high risk pregnancy. And she had to be going to weekly visits pretty early in the pregnancy. And the doctor started noticing that she would miss appointments last minute and cancel last minute, or not show up, or show up an hour late, all of this. And luckily the doctor reached out to a social worker and said, I don't know what's going on, but something clearly is happening. And so the social worker reached out, and it turned out she didn't have reliable transportation. She was relying on not a great not a really great public transportation option, or relying on friends and family for rides, and that wasn't reliable. And so we were able to set her up so that she could use Lyft rides that were charged to our account, to go to and from prenatal visits, right? And so, you look at that and you think, she ended up giving birth to, I think the baby was either full term or very close to full term. So baby was in the hospital a couple days and then released, right? And did her going to regular prenatal appointments help that? Absolutely. And so, I think it's really just being gracious and understanding. And I think that one of the things that also separates us from a lot of places is we've been through all three of these stages. And so we know, and, we can think of things. I mean, talking about the distance of NICU, Colette was in a NICU that was 10 to 15 minutes from our house. And that felt so far for us. And that we actually looked into, do we get an Airbnb right here? The reason why we didn't was because the way that the hospital is set up, there was, hotel options was still going to be like a 5-minute drive, and, things like that. And so we ultimately were like, well, we'd rather be in our comfort in our home if we're already going to have this. But if there had been a hotel, across the street, we would have been in that. And, that was very, something. So when you start adding up long distances where people can't go every day, they're going once a week or whatever, that's really difficult. And that's really something else. So.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you say, Michelle, is that what distinguishes your organization versus the big name organizations that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that, are in a similar space, maybe not specifically pregnancy, but kind of thereabouts, is that the dollars that are donated to your organization are going to actually get through to a patient or a parent. And then on top of that, there's something very distinguishable, which is the simple fact that a lot of people have lost touch with what other people who are emotionally incapable of expressing what they need, they've lost touch of what someone actually needs. Like only someone like yourself and your family, Michelle, could read an application and say, you know what? No, this person is asking for a piece of jewelry with their child's name, birthday, whatever it might be, not because they, just want to be flashy, because this is like the emotional connection that they get to have, like literally, just softly on top of their heart. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that someone who hasn't been through it would read an application in the same way. And I also don't imagine that a big organization that has been around is going to be as sensitive, because it's a reality, right? So different organizations have different KPIs, and they have different commitments that they have to make to different people. But this organization is so grassroots, it's so real, and it's been already impactful across the 50 states, over $1 million. I mean, what's the exact number? I want to be sure to give you.
Just over 1.5.
Yeah. Yeah. Operating, out of your home while you're
Mhm.
looking at your child and your
Right.
husband is your support. So I think, I think there's a lot to be said in terms of getting to know your organization, getting to know you and really supporting you. And I want to just ask you something that's like so bold. I mean, like we're talking like, I don't even know, another planet, right? Kind of bold.
Mhm.
So let's imagine that there is someone listening to this conversation right now. And this person has they got their tax money back, let's say, right? So
Mhm.
they got like some thousands of dollars back from taxes. And they themselves, maybe they're a rainbow baby, right?
Right.
Or maybe they have suffered some sort of a loss or have some reason to kind of want to support moms. Like, what would be like that magic wand check that you would want that person to consider cutting and giving to your organization in like the next 30 days?
Yeah. So I will tell you my goal right now is by the end of 2024 is to raise an additional $50,000. The reason for that amount is we are budgeted right now to be fiscally responsible. We are budgeted, we give away $5,000 every week.
Mm.
And the need is far exceeding what we're giving out. We are always looking, and so like any, extra dollars that we can do, we are always trying to do a little bit more than that, but that's what we can, responsibly know we do. $50,000 would allow us to go up to $6,000 a week, which means that every week we would be helping between one and two more families. So our average give right now is about $500 a family. Um, we do have up to 1,000 with some families who just really need a lot more assistance. And so it would really end up being probably, 100 more families next year that we could help. And so that's really my goal. So if anybody wants to write a $50,000 check today, I would absolutely adore it. And I would, then be able to spend the rest of the year, perhaps just, maybe we can get to 200 families, right? So that's really what I would say. But I think, on the donation piece, and I really, this is something we've really worked hard for, is we have worked with certain donors and they cover our overhead costs. And like Melissa said, we are a very lean organization. It is mostly me. My husband helps me review applications. Just this year, I brought on an assistant to finally help me, who works 20 hours a week. So we're a very, very lean organization. But we have worked with donors. And so we have a couple of donors who cover our overhead expenses. And so every donation that comes in goes directly to the financial assistance program and directly to a family. So for me, that's always something I have looked at other organizations. And I think, there's some really big organizations that if you looked at, they are giving, your donations going 50% to marketing or to anything like that. And that was something I wanted to be really clear that was not our goal with raising money. Our goal was to help as many families as we could. And so it's going directly, 100% of that is going to a family in need.
Perfect. Perfect. And so then I just wanted to slice that number up a bit because I know that someone listening might be like, $50,000. Oh my God,
Right.
from my personal family budget. But no, let's think creatively, right? Let's use
Right.
our imagination. So, what would be some other ways that someone can help who is listening to this conversation? And let me just like start with this one idea. First of all, for the most part, if you work for an employer, they have a matching system. So that's
Mhm.
an option available to you. So let's just
Right.
imagine 25 is like not possible. So let's just say whatever the half of 25 is, was possible, right? Let's just imagine. Then you would ask your employer to have the other half. And again, I'm just thinking very big. That's one way. But something that you shared with me as a result of being in my group coaching program was this idea of using your birthday and
Mhm.
how that was really, really helpful. So, why don't you explain that? Because that might be an alternative for people
Right.
listening.
Right. Yeah, we found the birthday really started on Facebook, and that you could have fundraisers for your birthday that your friends and family could donate to, and that they would do it through Facebook. They would get tax receipts via that way. And so it was a really good way. And so what we found was that families and friends who were doing that were having pretty good success rates. And right. And it could be anywhere from, $100, $200 up to, and it's really dependent on what the person would want us. That is a goal. And, how much sort of promoting they want to do of that.
Sorry, I have a dog barking, so I figured I would put the headphones on. But, really, we were finding that was a great way. I think, especially, I mean, as all of us get older, right? I don't want a lot of stuff. And so I would prefer that somebody donate, those funds to a cause I would really believe in. Like I would prefer those kinds of things. And so, I think that's a great way to tell people like, what, don't spend your money on a gift for me. I don't need a gift. Could you instead donate to a cause I really believe in? And, I think a lot of people are willing to do that and really willing to say, okay, that's great. One of the things, I mean, just today, my mom and her birthday is in October, so she's already thinking ahead that far. She said, I'd like to go to dinner with the family, and then anything that you would have spent on me, I would like to be donated to the foundation. And, it's a really beautiful way to do things. And it's a really, great way to just sort of say, I'm going to do it. And that a lot of people, I think we all can generally afford from time to time, anywhere from $25 to $50 if, and that's saying you don't really have a lot of money, a lot of wiggle room in your budget. And so, if you have good friends who would spend that amount of money on you to take you for dinner or for drinks or something like that, or who would give you a gift, saying instead, okay, don't do that and donate to a cause that I really believe in. And so that we have found is really been a huge way that people can take advantage of, and it doesn't just have to be birthdays. It can be, I have a friend of mine from college who had twins in the NICU, and she always promised that if everything worked out and they came home, that she would do a donation every year on their birthday. And so she does it for her kids' birthdays, right? And so I think it's just really great ways to kind of continue that. And
yeah, absolutely. And so before we close, just because you have a t-shirt and I know that you have merchandise that is also in light of this organization, what does your t-shirt say? It's a blue shirt for anyone
blue
that's just
shirt,
listening to the
so
audio.
And then it says Mama of an Angel. And so and we have all of the we have of Angel and of NICU Warrior, we have Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, siblings. So my son wears often, he'll wear a Brother of an Angel shirt. For NICU babies, we have onesies all the way up through kids shirts so that they themselves are NICU warriors. And then even in adult sizes, we have that as well. We have an IVF line that we have recently come out with for something that is really at risk and really trying to be challenged in a lot of different ways. So again, it's IVF baby all the way up through adult t-shirts, IVF mom, dad, all of that.
Yeah.
And then and then we also just added, I was like, I knew there was another area, but we just also added at a recommendation of a social worker we work with who said, I don't have personal experience, but I really want to root for people. So we now have an advocate line. So it's NICU advocate, IVF advocate, and loss advocate. And so, really just trying to, I think, and you said this one time, was like a t-shirt's not just a t-shirt. And I think that's really important. When I wear this shirt and I have a NICU warrior and I have an IVF advocate and all of those things, when I wear this, I feel closer to Colette. And, and it's also something that, my joke is always I talk about a lot of taboo topics, right? When I wear these, I'm also telling other people like it's okay and you are not alone. You're not the only other person. And it's so interesting how I get such great feedback, where people will come up to me and say, oh, I also have an angel baby. Or, my sister lost a child or anything like that. And I think that's a really great just connection way to know that you're not alone, and to know that other people are experiencing that and talking about it. So yes. And the proceeds go to our financial assistance program as well. So.
Perfect, Michelle. So let's just give everyone a sense of where they can go to learn more about you and the organization. So website, social handles, what are they?
Yeah. So it's Colette, 1L, 2Ts, Louise.com is our website. On Facebook, we're Colette Tisdahl, Tisdahl. On Instagram, it's Colette Louise Tisdahl. On Twitter, which is my personal favorite, it's the Tisdahl. And then we're on YouTube, LinkedIn, and just really Google us, we come up, and you can kind of check out all the different things.
Thank you, Michelle. So I wanted to just close by saying the following, because I think it really it's important that, and this needs to be said, period. But this idea that somebody else is doing this, or somebody else must be doing this, or somebody might be paying attention to this topic is so, like, that's a really dangerous thought. It's a really, really dangerous thought. And I think we have evidence of that in our surroundings and the world at this time. And I think it's also something that needs to be really, really, you need to sit with this idea that, guess what? What if it's you? What if it's you who is supposed to be the advocate of that cause? What if it's you that's supposed to solve that challenge? What if it's you that's supposed to open your mouth, use your loud voice, and amplify, someone else who is no longer here on this earth? What if it's
Right.
you? And I'm saying that to listeners, I'm saying that to myself, I'm saying that to Michelle. Like, I think it's really, really unfortunate that oftentimes when we see things, it's almost like we're desensitized, and we look the other way, like, oh, they must not be talking to me, there must be someone else handling this. That's super
Right.
powerful. Here's the reality. Oftentimes, there just is not. There
Right.
really is not. There is not. And so I invite anyone that's listening, more than anything else, there might be something on your heart. There might be a message that you want to share, that you are thinking to yourself, nah, I couldn't possibly make a dent in that world, or someone else must be handling that. And I want you to just really thoughtfully sit with that, even meditate and consider the idea that maybe somebody else is not handling it, and that somebody else is actually supposed to be you. And so I
Right.
want to just end
Right.
right there.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Michelle. And
Absolutely.
all
Thank
of
you.
your links, you're welcome. And all of your links are going to be in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, just look at the device at the bottom, look in the description, and you'll see all these links. At the same time, Michelle is super, super approachable. So if you want to know what's the best way for you to donate money to the organization, reach out to her. Would Instagram be the preferred place to kind of just send you a DM like, wait, I heard all these
That's totally
options?
fine. Any of the social media, any of that. Like I said, we're really lean, so I'm checking all of those. There's no, nobody else is doing that. So,
Yes, yes,
for
yes.
sure.
It is definitely a very lean team. So thank you again, Michelle, and anyone that's listening. If this really caught your attention, if you want to be that somebody else for this organization, do not hesitate and reach out to Michelle. Or if you want to reach out to me, because we're already hanging out on Instagram and I could reach out to Michelle, I'm happy to be the conduit. So thank you again, everyone. And until next Tuesday. All right, here we go. Alrighty, so Michelle, wanted to have an understanding, like when you were first, or not even, like, what were you thinking at the time that you and I spoke pertaining to the program? Like, what were you trying to accomplish? How did you feel before deciding to go for Fertile Imagination to networking success?
Right. I had really reached kind of a turning point in my work. I spent the first few years just getting the word out so we could get applicants and families to apply. And I did a lot of work on that, and now I was shifting to really trying to fundraise and grow our program. And so I knew that that wasn't necessarily my strongest suit. I would, like I can go find community and tell people about resources all day long, right? And I can do that. And that was like a very, although it took a lot of work, I was very easy for me to come up with. But now to flip it, it's hard. And, I'm not great at asking for money, and I'm not great at all these things, and I knew I had to do it, and I knew I had to network, I knew how to do everything. And it was also coming at a point where we really closed ourselves off during COVID. And that was because we were expecting a baby, and then we had a baby and we didn't have a vaccine for him until he was almost 2. And so we were really protective of him. And so not only had it been that I was much more of an introvert, and that a lot of those kind of crowds and everything stressed me out, and I had to really prepare for it and be, on top of it. But then we had this like long hibernation where I hadn't done any of it. So, it's kind of a skill that wasn't my best skill, and then it was rusty. So I think that's really where I was at. I think the program came along, and I just thought, to me, it felt like one of those things that I thought would really help me a lot, and that it would feel like one of those things, if I didn't do it, I would regret it. And so that was really, that was my thinking and how I was feeling going into it.
That's so interesting. What made you think that if you didn't go into it at that moment, you would regret it? What kind of went into that?
I think it was just, I didn't even really know where to start. And I think I needed somebody who would work with me to develop a better plan. I needed some of that like outside motivation that I was lacking, because it's hard when you're doing this day in and day out, especially when you are on your own largely. It's hard to know, am I doing things the right way? What is this? And so, I think in talking with you, I was like, this is somebody who's going to push me out of my comfort zone, and I need that right now. And, I wasn't getting that in any other way, really. I was getting it sort of informally here and there, but I wasn't getting somebody who's going to like be like, no, let's push you out of this comfort zone and everything. And so I really just wanted that, and I knew I needed that. And so that was really where I thought, if I don't do this program, I don't know how I'm going to find somebody who's going to do that, and I don't know that I have it in me right now to do it for myself and really push myself.
Hmm. So before starting the program, what sort of doubts or uncertainties did you have about joining? And then how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think it was, I think doubts are just, it's hard for me to invest in myself, and hard for me to like kind of take that time to say I'm working on myself, but it does have another goal. And also we should be investing in ourselves. And so I think that was really one of my biggest doubts. I didn't feel like in some other programs and things that I've looked at, I felt like I don't really know that this is going to be successful. I more felt like, really, I was like, Melissa's going to kick my butt a little bit and get me out of my comfort zone. And that was what I needed. And I knew that that's what I needed. So I think that was, really where the kind of the doubts settled in, like, yes, they were there. When I first started, they were still there a little bit. And then I think it was, very quickly, it was like, oh yeah, no, this is really what I needed. I needed that, push.
Yeah. And you know what I think is interesting? So your background, like you're like a JD, like were you a trial attorney?
I was, yeah.
Okay, can I just put context here? Because the assumption would be that a trial attorney would be like crazy intense, totally like gun ho, super loud. I'm just kind of curious, like this was not you then, or was it simply because of all the emotions, or what was it that?
Yeah, I think it was definitely the emotions. I think I was never an aggressive. It was definitely, I was never super aggressive. I knew how to like turn it on for the little bit of the case, but I wasn't really super aggressive outside of court. And so I think it was kind of like I didn't have that same platform of saying like, okay, in here, in this context, this is what I have to do. I didn't feel that same way. I think it was definitely the emotions, right? It's really hard in fundraising because I think there's this part of me that's like, what do you mean you're not going to give money to my daughter? And I think that's a really hard position to be in, where it's like I have to separate that out and understand that it's not the same emotional thing for most people who are going to encounter it. And so I think I needed that. I think I was also just tired, right? Like I think fundraising is really tough. I think there was some things of, growing up and just culturally is like, you're not supposed to ask other people for money, right? It's supposed to be stay within the family, all of that. So I think it's a very foreign concept to me. To ask for money and really ask for help. I mean, I think that that's something that, was tough for me, right? And so I think all of those things kind of combined into this point where it was hard for me to do it and to think of how to do it. And fundraising is known for taking a really long time to come to fruition, and I was exhausted. I mean, and I didn't know how to start, and that was the really big thing. So yeah.
Okay. So then what aspects of the program set it apart from other experiences, and how did those differences contribute to your success?
I mean, I think the first thing is I had never really seen a program that fully integrated the fact of being a mom and what that took, as well as your work. And so I think it was just this, I was like, this quote always thinks of me as like, you're supposed to, in this day and age, you're supposed to work like you don't have a kid, and you're supposed to parent like you don't have a job, right? And that's not the reality, right? They're both hand in hand. Things that happen with your child affect work, and things that happen with work affect your child. And so, kind of that tug and pull. What I always liked was that you were very forthcoming of like, this is you working within all of your obligations and all of the things that are going to pull at you, and you are going to have to adjust things as as it goes on. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that felt like that was saying, you want to be the best mom you can possibly be, and you also want to do the best job you can possibly do, and that is going to ebb and flow on both ends, depending on needs and what's going on, and that's okay. And then how can we do this? And so one of the things that I think was really good, that I really appreciated always was how being with your kids was like a way to sort of work on your imagination and to sort of play with life and see it through their eyes. And that to me was really helpful, because I think there was a lot of, if I did all this stuff with my son, that was great, but then I was also thinking about all the stuff that I didn't do, and vice versa. And so I think it was just very much being able to say, like, even spending time with our children, we are developing ourselves and really thinking and playing it out of it and getting out of our own heads, which I think was like one of the biggest benefits to the program. Was I was forced to get out of my own head, which is a dangerous place to stay in. And
Yeah, I would agree. I said that to myself yesterday. I was like, get out of your head. What is it? In your head, you're dead, or something like that. Okay. So then the other question would be, okay, so is there a particular aspect of the program, so something specific, that exceeded your expectations or significantly contributed to your growth and success?
I think the strategies of networking, not just being when you show up to an event, but doing a lot of the pre-work. I just had never really thought of it. And I had looked at networking in the terms of like, you show up to this event, it's super awkward, maybe you meet a few good people, but then there's not really a great, it's just awkward and it's, weird to do it. And instead, to convert that into making some contacts, saying, hey, I'm going to be here at this, let's connect, all of that removed a lot of that awkwardness. And then I think that also the other thing was like helped with, um, how do we follow up afterwards? I think it was so much easier when you had some pre-conversations to then do the follow-up of you had a little bit of a dialogue already going into it, and then you had the dialogue at an event, and then you had afterwards. And so it was much more seamless. And for me, who has some of that inner dialogue and that imposter syndrome, everything, it then put me in a space where people were already connecting with me. And it wasn't me going in cold to an event and not, knowing anybody, not having any sort of connection with anybody. And I think that was a big difference too.
Yeah, people were trying to give you hugs,
Yeah.
which I'm not saying that we could promise hugs at all networking events, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's talk about results or achievements that you're most proud of. So how do you see them impacting your future endeavors?
Yeah. I mean, I have been making contacts and reaching out to people that I never would have thought to reach out to. And so we had some success, probably last year and a little bit before that, with some of the doctors that were from the hospital we delivered at, and just, being very gracious and, we had a big fundraiser, and the neonatologists were all coming up to me independently and saying, like, we know like how much good you're doing for our families. And, that was huge. But I didn't really know how to like start that connection, right? Like that connection started because we had been at that hospital. We had all these great relationships with social workers, and they like helped us with all of that. But I didn't really know how to do it. And instead it was like, okay, so how do you capitalize on those? Strategies for how you're on showing up on LinkedIn, strategies for who you're looking to connect with. And, getting past sort of that. I mean, there's a lot of noise in this area, and getting past that noise to say, okay, let's start thinking about who is the strategic person to connect with. And who is, and then also like defining our goals and setting them out and saying that. I had never felt like I could say, this is my goal, and not sound like I was being too salesy. And instead saying like, this is my goal, and like I want to work with people who believe in this mission to get me to that goal.
So what would you say is like the boldest thing you said or did throughout our time together?
So I will say that, so Elizabeth Carr, who is the first IVF baby born in the US, I have followed her on LinkedIn, and she's very much an advocate for reproductive rights. And we started an IVF line after the decision in Alabama and all that. We really wanted, I think one of the ways that we're going to combat this is for all of us to start telling our stories, and how IVF has helped us grow our families. I think that that's huge, and that's one of the first things that we can really do. And so it just so happened that during Infertility Awareness Week, which was about a month ago, she posted something, and orange is the color for infertility awareness. And she said, every year I remind myself that I don't have a lot of orange, and I always mean to buy orange and I don't. And I just commented and said, I would love to send you a t-shirt that says IVF baby in adult sizes, and we have them in orange. And so she like said, yes, I would love to wear one. And so we sent her a shirt, and she, has agreed that once she gets the shirt, she will wear it and post on social media. And I think, it was just one of those things, right? It was just, it kind of like came to me, and I was like, you know what? The worst case is she can ignore it, and it's not going to change anything of like what I'm doing, right? And the best thing is she can do what ended up happening, which was like, yes, I'll do it. And, here's my address. And how do we do that? And so I think that was probably one of the boldest things I've done. And then I think really just putting myself out there, saying it, my goal is 50,000 by the end of the year, saying that to people, and explaining why that was the case, and what that was coming from. There wasn't an arbitrary number. It was a very well thought out plan. And, in terms of the numbers, and then this is what I want to do. And so how do I do that?
That's amazing. Okay, so the first IVF baby now has a t-shirt, and it doesn't even stop there because now you establish that relationship. Okay, so final question. So if you were to recommend this program to someone considering investing in their personal or professional growth, what key insights or benefits would you share to help them make an informed decision?
I would say that Melissa is very good at the balance of pushing you out of your comfort zone, but also telling you what you're doing is really that you're doing well, and having those things. And I think that's a delicate balance, and I think you achieve that very well. And then reframing things, and really allowing yourself, we get so in the weeds about what we're doing, and it's hard for us to regularly take ourselves out and look at the big picture. And I think that is something that you forced us to do. I think also you really forced me to like look at what my goals were, and in a year, 5 years, 10 years, and then push me like, well, why couldn't it be this? And it was very different for me to think that way, and to not put in all of the normal judgments that come up, like, oh, we're never going to do this, we're never going to do that, that's not realistic, and just really say like, okay, what if that was your goal? And I think that was really helpful for me. I think the creativity and imagination piece was really helpful. And I think learning from our kids, I mean, my God, like the stuff my son says and comes up with is hilarious, and is really, it's amazing to see. I mean, yesterday we took him to the Children's Museum, and we were in the elevator, and there was a baby, and I waved at the baby in the stroller, and then he took that as a sign, and he said, "Hi, it's me, Elliot." And I just kept thinking, oh my God, the boldness. Like I would never, like I wouldn't think of saying that, but he was like, okay. And just the confidence of like, he knew it's me, Elliot. Like, of course you should know who I am, and that kind of thing. And those, and I just remember sort of, really sitting there in that moment, and kind of trying not to giggle because it was so adorable and cute and all that. But also thinking, hey, there's a big lesson to be learned here of, the directness, the boldness, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't thinking all the things of like, are they going to think I'm annoying? Are they going to, are they going to judge me? And none of that mattered to him. And that's a huge lesson for all of us, how kids don't have that. And yet, because they don't have the time of like all the years of questioning and self-doubt that have factored into us, and that, that's something we can really learn from our kids.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of times when we lose sight of the fact that the source of information and insight almost doesn't matter in a way, right? Like here's this child teaching what, this fancy smancy leadership guru could be teaching an executive at an organization, which is to be bold in your vision, right? And
Right.
and be open to conversation with anyone at all. And I think, in the program, that's something that I wanted to just really highlight, which was that we have imagination experts in residence right under our nose. And, they always have these little sayings like, oh, tell me your company vision. Like if I were a 5-year-old, well, hello, a lot of us have like legit 5-year-olds in our
Right.
homes that we could filter, some of this communications and messaging, and we could just like get down to, what really matters, which is simplicity and just making sure that we're talking to the right people, and that, we have what it takes to solve the challenges that we want to solve. So thank you so much, Michelle, for this. I'm so sorry. I was like hijacking you. I'm like, oh my God.
No, it's fine.
I'm
No
like,
problem.
Michelle, still with me. But yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, this was fantastic.